Welcome to another episode of the Feature Presentation Podcast, where every week we take a deep dive into the trenches of independent filmmaking. I'm your host, Derek Diamond, back again after taking last week off. I know that a couple of weeks ago I said that the show is going to be back, every week from here on out, but I had a pretty good reason, I think, for missing out on last week's episode. My intention was to do what we're going to be doing this week, which we'll be talking about in just a little bit. But to be perfectly honest, my brain was kind of fried after the weekend that preceded last Monday because we filmed the majority of my latest short film titled The Feature. As of this recording, we have not finished yet. Long story short, we had planned to do everything in 2 days, but unfortunately, things ran pretty late on Sunday after already having a long day on Saturday. So I made the decision that we were going to push the filming of the last couple of scenes back to another weekend, which we're going to be filming this upcoming Sunday. Because the way it was structured, we were going to do the scenes on Saturday at CoLab, which is an office building located in downtown Pensacola. And then Sunday we were going to film at New Yorker Deli, then move back to CoLab to do the final 2 scenes. So we decided to push the last 2 scenes of the movie back, but we're taking care of that this weekend. So after that, filming will be completed. And then we're going to wrap up the editing and hope to maybe have everything done by the end of next month, which would be pretty impressive. So I wanted to take this time, and I was originally going to have a guest on this week, but she had to postpone until next month. So I thought this would be the perfect opportunity to give the listeners and viewers of this show an exclusive first look at The Feature. And I'll say, if you're listening to this on the audio version, I would suggest you go watch the YouTube version because this is going to be much more of a visual podcast. But I will be giving as much of detail as I possibly can with what I'm going to show, because I'm going to show some screen caps from the film. And I want to preface this by saying that these are rough cuts. The movie is going to be color corrected, so it's going to look a little different than what you're going to see on this podcast. But I'm not going to be sharing the screen caps anywhere else. You're going to have to actually go through the episode and look at them. So I wanted to give a little bit of context behind the movie itself and a little bit of a history behind it. I don't want to dive into the full story of it yet because we'll save that for other episodes down the line. But the gist of the movie is it's about a guy who wants to quit his job and become a filmmaker. Now, when I wrote The Parker Syndrome, my previous short, I knew that I wanted my next project to be a movie about making a movie. So I wrote the first draft of the script. I believe I completed it in January of 2020. We all know what happened soon afterwards, so that really put the development of this on the back burner. And I was still tweaking the story, every now and then, but I was busy also with still working at the Blue Wahoos, even though we didn't have a baseball season at the time. We were still doing events pretty regularly. And yeah, it was a very busy time. I started dating Samantha, my now wife, who helped me out immensely with the creation of The Feature. So wrote several drafts, and then I think we ended at 12, I think was the final count of what of the number of drafts that I did. And then we filmed, a couple of weeks ago. So I think what we'll dive right into first is I want to go through kind of by day as far as how we filmed. And I want to give 2 shout outs. One to, of course, my wife Samantha for really giving the story a new life that it didn't have when I was writing it by myself. because the general story remained kind of the same. But when I let Samantha read it, she said, the story is good, but the dialogue, it needs some work. And I said, why? And she said, because all the characters talk like you and you don't talk like most people. So it was good of her to do that. It's always good to have honest feedback when it comes to stuff like writing, directing, editing, because you're not going to know how you're going to get better if you don't get honest feedback. So we've been working through the script and changing up the dialogue and giving everybody their own personality, essentially. And then I also have to give a shout out to Chad Sanders, who is also a producer of the film. He helped come up with some comedic bits during what we call the montage of the film, because it's basically showing everything that's going wrong with the making of the movie within a movie. So that we really needed that, because I'm not very good at writing comedy. So it's good to have a fresh set of eyes to come in and say, hey, maybe add a little more comedy here, maybe a little bit of comedy there. So shout out to him for that as well. And I've got a few screen caps that I'm going to throw up for those who are watching on YouTube. So here is our first one. And this is the making of the movie within a movie. So for those who are watching on YouTube, you can see a few of the characters here. On the left, we've got Matt, who's wearing the green and gray polo, kind of directing the two actors. We see Robert, who's standing over there on your left, the guy in the button-up shirt, and then Maria, who's the actress in the movie within the movie, looking on with a little bit of disdain, but you'll have to see the full movie in a couple months to find out why. And over here on the right, we have Nick Smith, who's really kind of a jack of all trades when it comes to film. He worked as a grip on this film, but we also asked him at the last minute if he wanted to be on camera playing a crew member. And of course, Nick's always great with doing that. So, and then we have Felix, who was a PA for the film. He hopped in also, as really most everybody in the crew appears at some point as a member of the film within a film crew. And then over here on the right, we have Katie, who is Matt's best friend and is kind of a producer / AD for the film. And here's another screen cap here. I'm sorry, I laugh every time I see this, because we got Thomas Carter Rochester, who's been in numerous local films. And a funny story behind him is he and I have known each other for years. I think we're going on 3 years at this point. And we've worked together on other people's projects, but we've never worked together on each other's. So when I wrote the character of Doug, he was the only person that I had in mind to play. And is the only role that we didn't audition, because I knew that I wanted him to play that character. Like, I wrote it really for him. And he plays your typical, slacker sound guy that I'm sure most of you fellow filmmakers know somebody like that. So it doesn't have to be sound guy. It could be, producer, it could be DP, it could be a PA. Every set has that kind of quirky, out there kind of character. So that is Doug. And then of course we've got Nick, who doubles as director of photography, and we've got Matt and Katie looking on in we'll say slight disapproval. So these two scenes were both filmed on Saturday, both at the Collab building, which is the office building I talked about over in downtown Pensacola. As we're also going to go back to film the scene with Matt quitting his job. Spoiler alert, but we all knew that was probably going to happen. So then we move on to Sunday, which we filmed at New Yorker Deli. Also, shout out to Chad for locking down these two locations, Collab and New Yorker. So here we are at New Yorker Deli. This is actually from the opening scene of the movie, where Matt and Katie are talking about Matt potentially quitting his job. I can't praise Kevin Almodovar enough for these scenes here at New Yorker, especially because I actually wanted to film shooting the other way, away from the windows, because I didn't know if they would cause any kind of problems. So he had the idea, and Samantha had the idea as well, to film the other way with the windows in the background. And as you can see, I'll throw the screen cap back up here. It was the right decision. Like I couldn't be happier with how these scenes look. So we filmed 3 scenes at New Yorker, and then there's this one as well, which has kind of a sunset look to it. And I just can't say enough good things about it. It just looks so good, and I think with, Matt's blue shirt really kind of adds, it looks great. Like it just adds so much color to, because in the background you have kind of the warm tones with the browns and the different shades of browns and the lights that you see. But having that blue shirt and, with Katie's shirt and with Robert's as well, it just adds so much to it. It looks really, really good. So that's kind of what the settings of the film will look like. And I hate that we had to push the shooting back with Rob Eubanks, who's playing Matt's boss. But we'll show those on another podcast, because I'll talk about this a little bit later, but I have a kind of a marketing plan for the movie and with this podcast tying into it. So I'll go through and I'll show individual screen caps and tell you a little bit about the characters that are in the film. So we'll start off with Matt, who is our primary protagonist. He's, guy in his early to mid 30s. He wanted to be a filmmaker, went to school for it. It's where he met Katie, who you'll hear a little bit more about in a second. And he wants to quit his job and do what he wants to do. And I think, all of us who have that kind of aspiration, we can all kind of relate to that. And that's really what I wanted to capture. And I want to give a shout out to Jace Gibson, who played Matt. When we had auditions a couple of months ago, he really kind of blew me away in the sense that his audition was exactly how I pictured the character on screen. So it was really almost a no-brainer seeing him, and going back and watching the recording of his audition. I thought to myself, if he's available, I want him to play Jace, because if he's going to capture it already in the audition, chances are he's going to do much better in rehearsals and on camera, and that turned out to be the case. So yeah, shout out to Jace Gibson, who's also he's currently shooting the Sacred Heart series, which is being filmed here in Pensacola. So it was great working with him, and that's kind of a reoccurring thing with the cast, because it's something different about the cast from this as opposed to the Parker Syndrome, is that I actually held in-person auditions. With the Parker Syndrome, I just had everybody submit, recordings, and I went back and watched them and kind of deduced it from there. But with this, I wanted to do in-person auditions where I could give live feedback, and we did some over Zoom as well, which we'll kind of get into. But I thought Jace was perfect for the role, and he knocked it out of the park. Was very easy to work with, which the entire cast was. So that I can't say enough good things about him. He captured what I had envisioned from the very beginning, so it was really a no-brainer. And speaking of no-brainers, we'll move on to Katie, played by Samantha Savoie, which is a really fun name to say. She auditioned, funny enough, over Zoom before we did the in-person auditions. And again, much like Jace, it's really... So Katie's character, I'll talk a little bit about Katie's character before I get into Samantha's audition and everything like that. Katie was kind of the I don't want to say the anti-Matt, but with Matt being very unsure of himself, his best friend had to be someone who is very sure of herself. And I wanted that to be a strong female presence to really kind of balance Matt out, to have that dynamic. So when Samantha auditioned over Zoom, again, I was, and Chad as well, was absolutely blown away by her audition. And then I showed Samantha, my wife, the auditions too, and she's like, she's gonna be tough to beat. And then we went through the auditions in person, and everyone did great. Like, we didn't have any bad auditions, and it made it really tough to choose. But Samantha's was just a little bit better. And from the very beginning, we were thinking she's probably going to be the one to do it. And then we did a couple of chemistry reads over Zoom, and then we did some in person. And that was when we made the decision to go with Samantha. And she was, again, like Jace, very easy to work with, very pleasant to chat with about, different things with the character and things like that. So again, shout out to Samantha for really knocking it out of the park as Katie. So now we'll move on to Robert, played by Mr. Jeff Stewart, who is, I don't want to give away a ton about Robert, but as you can tell, he's a waiter at this restaurant and then also ends up being an actor in the movie within a movie. And the funny thing about Jeff is he originally read for Matt, and the three of us, me, Chad, and Samantha, had a little meeting about, these different characters, and Samantha was like, well, why don't you have him read for Robert if he wants to? And then we did a read over Zoom, had him come in for a chemistry read, and wound up getting the part. And I will say Jeff very much surprised me, and not that I had, low expectations for him, but I almost didn't know what to expect. And I'll give Jeff credit for this. He really made the role his own. And by the time we got to actually shooting, he felt like a natural. And it was just a very smooth performance. And I can't wait for you all to see how Jeff does, because I thought the dynamic with everybody was great. And this, I don't want to sound like a broken record when I'm saying this, but the cast all worked extremely well together. And I think we got extremely lucky with everybody, because I don't think you could have asked for a better group. So then moving on to Maria, who is the actress in the movie within a movie, played by, she was great. Leah Christine Johnson was, again, one of those that was almost like a no-brainer. And her Katie was great as well. But her Maria was just, I don't know, there was just something about her dynamic. And we kind of put her through the ringer a little bit with her trying out different voices for these various scenes that she's in. And they were just so funny. Like you guys are going to be blown away by how funny she is. And it's that was a shot from the movie within a movie where things are just, nothing's going right. Absolutely nothing's going right. So she just adds such a funny dynamic to it. And her and Jeff played so well together. And she was actually in a movie that was recently spoofed on MST3K, which is kind of how we saw a little bit more of her acting skills and things like that, because I saw the trailer for it. And after her audition, again, we just knew that Leah was going to be the right one. And she even had some funny ideas on set, like, hey, what if I did this? And it turned out to make her character even better. And that's what I love about giving, and working with actors, I should say, because they're ultimately the ones that are playing the role. And if they add little nuances that you as the writer director don't think of, encourage that. Like, it's what's great about filmmaking is the collaborative effort and taking ideas that might make characters or scenes a little bit better. So I thought she again knocked it out of the park. We also have the character of Michael, who is Matt's boss, played by Rob Eubanks. I wish I had a screen cap of him, but as I said, we haven't filmed anything with him yet. So we'll share that at some other point in time on the podcast. And I will say, for those who are watching live, if you have any questions that you want to throw out there, it can be about the movie, it can be about really anything, because it's also an Ask Derek Anything kind of show as well. So any questions you want to throw in there, just throw them in the chat and I'll answer them before I get out of here. But last but not least, got to give a shout out to Doug, the sound guy, played by Thomas Carter Rochester. Again, as I mentioned, when I wrote this story, there was only one person that could pull off that character, and that is Thomas. And thankfully, I reached out to him and said, hey, I've got this script I'm working on. If you want to read it, I have the role of Doug. I have you in mind. The role is yours if you want it. And thankfully he said yes. And it was so fun to work with him. And it's funny because I remember meeting him, funny enough, in that very room that we filmed these scenes in at CoLab. I remember seeing this guy walk in with long flowing hair, Hawaiian shirt, and I'm like, I've got to get to know this guy because he just seems fun. And it turned out we have a lot in common. We have a lot of the same interests as far as movies and shows go. So we hit it off really well, and we've talked for years about working together, and we have on other people's projects, but not on each other's. And he, exceeded my expectations, and they were pretty high with him because if you're a local filmmaker in the Pensacola area or in the Gulf Coast, I can't say enough good things about Thomas. He brings such a positive energy to any set that he's on because of his personality. He's going to give it his all. He doesn't half-ass anything as far as acting goes. And he's created some great content as well. He's also a fellow podcaster. So shout out to him for that. Shout out to the entire cast. And I'll kind of end things with this crew photo here. Shout out to Steve Wise. This was after shooting at New Yorker Deli. You can see everybody here from left to right. We've got Jace, of course, who played Matt. Stephen Wise, who was a guest on this show a few weeks ago. He was my first AD. AD is assistant director for those who don't know. Then we have Samantha Savoy, who played Katie. Nick Smith, who was primarily a grip, was also on camera as well. In the back there, we have William Trotman, who was the first assistant camera. In front of him is Brandon Perdue, who was our sound mixer. Then we have Josh Shinnework, who is our second AD. In the back, next to that light, we have Josh Mueller, who is one of our PAs. In front of him is Chad Sanders, who is the producer. And then we have Ryan Mason, who is a PA. Isabel Paradise, who is a PA. Next to her is Samantha Diamond, my wonderful wife and co-writer and keeper of my sanity on set. And then, of course, there's me, Caleb Williamson, who was the first AC. And then we have the legendary Kevin Almodovar, who was our director of photography. And that was, of course, after all the scenes for day 2. So, yeah, that's really all I have to say. I don't want to give away too much about the film itself. I wanted to give kind of a first look at the movie and everything. So hopefully you guys enjoyed that. As far as the future immediate plans for the show, we have the last 2 scenes that we're shooting on Sunday. And then if everything goes according to plan, we'll have the movie done hopefully by the latest early October. And then from there, we'll set a premiere date that we'll do somewhere in the area. Hopefully we can find like a little theater that we can show it in. And then it'll be off to the festival circuit for the feature. And then as far as promotion goes, I plan to do 3 episodes that highlight the making of the film. I'll do 2 with the cast. I'll have Jace, Samantha, and Jeff hopefully on one episode, and then Rob, Leah, and Thomas on another. And then I'll have Chad, Steve, and hopefully Kevin for a third one to kind of go through the behind the scenes logistics of the film as well. So that's really about all I had. I know this is going to be a really quick episode, but I just wanted to do a little first look on the feature, and I don't have a ton of time, unfortunately, to do like a full hour-long episode, but we will be back to the normal format for next week's show. I've already got guest booked all the way through the end of September, so that is your first look at the feature, and we'll have more discussion on it. Had a blast making it. I, again, have to give a shout out to Samantha and Chad, because they really helped with a lot of the planning as far as the logistics and craft services and a lot of little things that I really missed out on as far as the Parker syndrome goes, because I had to do a lot of that on my own in addition to directing. So I had to wear a lot of different hats for that movie. And with this, it was much easier. So, shout out to them especially, but also shout out to the cast and crew. They were all just so great to work with. And I would work again with every single person that was a part of this. So I think I'm going to go ahead and wrap things up for this episode. So thank you to those who watched live. As always, the YouTube version will stay on YouTube. The audio version, you can check that out on all podcasting platforms, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and really anywhere you get your podcasts. So go ahead and play my outro music here. If you want to subscribe to the show, just head over to linktree.com/featureprezpod. You can find social media, podcast subscription information, as well as the YouTube page for this as well. And don't forget, we are live on YouTube Monday nights at 8 p.m. Central Standard Time. So that's going to do it for this week's show. Enjoy the rest of your week, and we'll see you guys back here next Monday for another fun episode of Feature Presentation with Derek Diamond.